Welcome to the future of payroll and workforce management insights by HR.com, your go-to resource for insights into payroll and workforce management. From navigating compliance and technology trends to exploring the latest in global payroll solutions, we're here to keep you ahead of the curve. Join us as we dive into the forces reshaping payroll and share practical strategies to optimize your workforce management. Let's get started. Well, hello and welcome everybody to this episode of Future of Payroll and Workforce Management, a podcast here at HR.com, where I am your host. My name is Brent Skinner. I do many things here at HR.com, but as with all episodes, this episode is about my guest. Welcome, Troy Markusson. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast.
Thanks, Brent. I'm glad to be here.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you're a global payroll executive. You've done a lot of that, and you're also a member of the Chime Workplace Payroll Advisory Council, which is great. I had their chief on the podcast a few weeks ago, Jason Lee. Really love Chime, and we have a really interesting topic today. You have sort of spearheaded a survey. It's the Payroll 2040 survey. It's around sort of the youth and what they kind of their perspectives on payroll and all this kind of stuff. And we're going to dive into that. Some really, really interesting stats from that survey. And we're going to dive into it. But first, so I like to ask all my guests, and you are no exception. There's a lot of passion in this space among payroll leaders. It's really interesting and very encouraging, and also in HR. What makes you tick? What gets you going every day when it comes to this area, when it comes to payroll, Troy?
Yeah. So for me, Brent, it is we're that only function. We impact every single employee every single day. And that has great responsibility, and we're the livelihood. And I've always felt that way from my very first role in payroll when I was actually in college as an intern entering timesheets. I felt that then of, hey, if we mess up here, that employee's going to, come Friday, they're going to be short time. So yeah, I mean, I am definitely a payroll nerd. And I do have a lot of passion around this space, and just, educating people around payroll, and educating my workforces that I work with around how to make sure, they're taking care of every benefit that they possibly can. They're really taking advantage of all that the employer has to offer.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's critical. I mean, people go to work for various reasons, obviously, but very, very few people go to work not expecting to be paid, right? It's how we survive, right? And so you want to get the time right. You want to get those calculations right. It's absolutely mission critical. Love the sweatshirt, by the way. I think it really fits in with the whole payroll nerd theme, I think. Love it. Love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Why don't we dive into this? So this was a survey. Maybe give us a little bit of a rundown, just like sort of an overview of what the survey was, how many people you participated, what the sort of mission and purpose of it was.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I've been spending a lot of time lately, like a lot, at my level, figuring out and transforming our payroll systems and HR processes for the future. And what I was finding time and time again was the voices in the room were people that look just like me, people that have been 20, 30 years in the field, and we weren't bringing the voices into those conversations that we really need to be focused on. And so, it started with even just, talking to my kids a little bit just around their pay experiences, or, in college now. I got one still in high school, and they all have their jobs, and, and even some of my friends' kids, just around pay. And I thought, we need to be listening to those voices a lot more. And so, really have done this, Brent, through a couple of different forms. We've done a survey. I've gotten almost 200 responses on that survey. So I've reached out to any club that I could think of, and at any of the college levels, reach out literally to every single SHRM group across the country at every single college to have them participate. And then I've also done some roundtable conversations to dive in deeper to those responses, and some of those continue. I'm going to be finishing up those over the next couple of weeks, and yeah, really just great insights. I think the average age was around 23 years old in the survey. Average work experience, 3-4 years. Again, I really wanted to focus in on, those early career professionals or college age students, because that's very quickly, we have an aging workforce, and people that look like me in 10 years time, hopefully, we're off to, different opportunities, and we're not designing payroll systems anymore at that point in time. So yeah, that was kind of the thought behind just starting to get some other voices. And then yeah, just great insights, and I had my eyes definitely opened, and some great ideas as well. So yeah, I've really enjoyed spending the time with the students and with the data.
Yeah, yeah, you said 10 years from now. I fully expect myself to be, sitting poolside in Barbados, just so you know.
There we
Um,
go.
in the event, right? Um, so what surprised you most, about from the survey findings about how
Yeah.
younger workers, yeah, like, what's the perception here? Because let me just set this up a little bit more, right? Because we've actually written about this, and we've had other podcast guests talk about, the different generations in the workforce and the different kinds of expectations. You know, I'm sure you do too. I'm old enough to remember when it wasn't, I didn't even think to question, or to wonder whether I could, receive my pay more than, on different times than when the company ran payroll. It just
Right.
wasn't even a question I asked, being Generation X, but we have all this sort of consumer grade, um, technological experience that's going around with Generation Z, especially, right? The digital natives, and they just have different expectations. So I'm really, really curious to hear what you've learned.
Yeah. Um, I would say probably the biggest shocker to me, Brent, was almost half of the respondents don't trust their employer to get their pay right. That was a pretty shocking number to me. I had to, as I was looking at the data, I had to go back and look at it again, and we dug into it a little bit more in some of the roundtables as well. One of the questions I asked on the survey was around, hey, would you lose trust in the company? Would you be concerned about the company if there was a $50 error in your check, and then if there was a $200 error in your check? And obviously, right, the expectation
Yeah.
was, oh, well, it'll be a much higher number if it's a $200 error. But almost 80% of the respondents said they would be very concerned with their company if there was a $50 error. That's not
50
much,
bucks.
right? That's
No.
that's you know that's a shift that somebody forgot to clock out on. Maybe the employee forgot to clock out, right, and it wasn't caught. So it might have started with the employee not doing something, but they're losing trust in their employer because of that. And then, Brent, you mentioned around technology, and again, it was an area. Obviously, I took some time, and we had conversations and we had data points as well around trusting using chatbots and whatnot. I mean, I feel very comfortable with, you know, my banking or going to utility or whatever, and I would rather work with a chatbot. Um, but, only about 20% of the respondents, if there's an error, felt comfortable. They want a human, right? Payroll, and we all know payroll is very personal.
Mhm.
So, they're saying, hey, 80% of them are saying, hey, you've already lost my trust if you're paying me wrong. And please don't give me, I don't want technology to respond back to me. I want a human on the other side of that. And I don't want to have to call into a call tree and hit this button and hit this button and blah, 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 and sit on hold for 8 minutes or receive a call back. Maybe you get it, maybe you don't. They want a human. They want to have human interaction. That was very, very common in our conversations, is how do we gain that trust back? And that was having a human on the other side, really listening and quickly addressing the problem.
That's interesting. So first of all, let's start with the sort of getting a live person, right? Um, we all know that there's that one customer service number that we call where we've kind of memorized exactly what cadence to do and which buttons to press so that we could get to a live person as
Hmm.
quickly as possible, right? Um, I've learned, to not respond to the voice activated thing at one point and then to hit 0 or 1 or 7, whatever it
Zero,
is at
zero,
one.
zero, zero.
Yeah, that also. Although some of them are wised up to that one. But anyway, but what really surprised me about this is that Gen Z also wants live people. I kind of went into this. You were starting to say this. And I thought, oh yeah, they probably are okay with chatbots because they're just used to that, digital natives and all that. But no, they want the live person, um, and also that $50. That's. Do you think that has anything to do with inflation? Because I spent close to $50 for a shockingly small amount of groceries just the other day.
Right?
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I
It
mean.
could be inflation. And, look, like the data, we also, to you and I, $50, right? Hey, we can wait, right? Whereas, these students, right? Some of this data, right? I had to remind myself, look, it's where they are in their journey. However, they are in the workforce already, and either graduating from college, early career, or working their way through college or high school and soon to be working full time. And so we gotta meet them where they're at, right? We gotta really meet them where they're at, and not, well, hey, our rules. And look, I remember a time not that many years ago where you'd see payroll departments, hey, we're not going to cut an off cycle unless it's over $200 or $300, right? Anything less. I'm seeing a lot of companies, lower that threshold still, but there still is a ways to go. And yeah, if all of your young workers are coming in, and yeah, that's impactful to them, we better listen, because we know that generation isn't, they're not tied down to that employer anymore, right? As soon as that trust is broken, they're gone, right? And companies take a long time to hire and find the right talent, and you're going to lose it if you don't care for the new team members coming in.
Yeah, it's a leading indicator of retention or lack thereof. Absolutely, the accuracy of your payroll. Why is there still such a gap between tracking pay and truly understanding total compensation from the employee's perspective?
Yeah. Um, because I think employers do a real crappy job of explaining it, Brent. Um, I think, I still see too many companies with on the employee's pay stub, and it's not clear. You'll see something like ER Med. Well, what the heck does ER Med mean? Us payroll people, well, that's your medical, that's the employer portion that the employer pays, right? Okay, well, we know that, but what does ER Med mean to anyone else, right? Or do they even put those on pay stubs? I've had people make the argument of, oh, no, we don't want to, it's too much information. I'm like, well, how are you explaining to your employees then, like, here's the total, your salary is X, but this is really what we're paying for you, right? So I think, first off, we need to do more to explain and educate. It has to be clear, it has to be easy. But then also, I think companies do a really poor job of even explaining when they do take on more. So, hey, come January, and it's time to sign on for benefits again. And, companies, many times well, we want to reduce the burden of the increase, so we're going to take on more of that increase. How often are they making that a big case, going out to their team members to say, hey, your benefit premiums are going to stay flat this year. However, that's because we're taking on more, and this is how much more we're investing. You're not seeing that money on your paycheck, but it is what we are really spending to take care of you. And
Mhm.
then, finally, just educating team members as well on like, here are all of the other benefits you're not taking advantage of. Hey, that's great. You're signed up for 401k. We match up to 6%. You're only at 3%. Hey, you know, we would encourage you to go to 6 so that we can contribute more into your retirement as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I look straight back to the employer and say, you all need to do a better job. And I still see far too many with not even doing a total comp statement, right? Or having some sort of tool available. And again, that was students, when I talked to them, they said, absolutely, it would be really neat to see a dashboard where they could see all of the components broken down. Um, and so that then when they go and, hey, maybe they're unhappy here and they're making $40,000, hey, I'm going to move here for 43, but they don't understand, hey, actually, I'm worse off at the 43 because my benefits are going to be much higher, or they don't match on the retirement side as much. We got to educate them. I think if we educate how much we're really spending on our team members, I think, you know, you would find employees much more appreciative of what the company is providing to them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I don't remember where, I don't recall where, but there was some study done way back where they f way back when we had sort of the landline phones, I guess, but probably with the cell phones as well. Dating myself here, but there was a time when the phone companies, now the cellular, providers, um, didn't want you to understand your bill. They didn't want you
Right.
to understand it, right? Because they wanted it to be complicated, so you'd be like, "Okay, whatever, I'll just pay it. It's just, it's like 40 bucks a month. Okay, whatever." This is way back machine, but that was not a small a pittance, but it was, it wasn't a terrible amount. But anyways, you don't want your paycheck to be too complicated to understand. That's not in an employer's interest, right? We talk about the employees being sort of like the customers, and what by that we mean all the benefits to them of being customers. We don't mean to treat them like like kind of passive customers. And so there's something to be said there. In the time we have remaining here, Troy. Um, Let's talk a little bit about automation, tech, and this kind of stuff. How can payroll leaders sort of balance automation and innovation in this
Yeah.
space? There's like a clear demand for human support and trust in the pay experience, which we've talked about at length now. Like, how can we balance this in the payroll space?
Yeah. Yeah. So frankly, I think payroll is one of the functions that is really ripe for AI and automation overall. But again, there's that balance. Um, Start with your internal processes. Start with how technology can help support your internal team members so that they're not heads down all day on their laptop and doing VLOOKUPs all over the place and trying to find those needles in the haystack, but instead they're able to spend more time on communicating with the field, on educating the field, on being able to take care of the team members of our customers. So for me, that's the biggest. But then also, use the technology to help educate and be more proactive. So, use this device more, right? Where, instead of, and look, the tools and the technology is definitely out there now to predict when a team member is going to have a question about their pay. So Brent hits the Social Security limit. And so if Brent does pay attention to his check, Brent may first think, oh, there must be a problem here. And so Brent's going to call up, right? Well, wouldn't it be better to send out a prompt to Brent to say, hey, Brent, you may notice on your next check, you're going to see more net pay. Here's why: you hit the Social Security limit for the rest of the year. So great that technology can predict and communicate that out in advance, but then take it a step further to educate now, to say, hey, you're going to get extra $100 a paycheck. Um, would you like me to set that aside for additional 401k or into a savings account for the rest of the year for you, right? Promote financial wellness. right? And then take it a step further. When Brent says, yes, I would like to put this in a savings account for the rest of the year. Okay, well, don't tell Brent, well, good luck now. Go and try and find how to do a direct deposit change on the portal. Do it on the spot, right? Take a snapshot of your bank statement that includes your bank account number and routing number. Boom, done. I've made this effective until December 1st. Come December 1st, right before that, another notification coming out to Brent say, hey, um, Social Security is going to start over next pay period. What would you like us to do here? Would you continue to like the savings, right? Because what's going to happen? Brent's not going to remember in September he got a big spike. And then in January, Brent's going to be calling again, right? So use technology in those ways to help educate, make that pay statement easier to understand, right? We should no longer be in 2026 working with PDFs, right, of a pay stub, right? It's got to be interactive, right? Maybe, hey, Troy, there is only enough room on the pay stub to put ER Med. Okay, well, if you have an interactive one, hover over it and it explains this is your employer portion of your medical that your employer is paying every pay period to cover your expenses, right? Provide links right on that pay stub as well, right? Here's your 401k, here's your 401k employer. When you hover over that, hey, you can click right on it. Okay, now I want to make a change to this, or I want to simulate that. And that was another big thing that students wanted when I spoke with them was they want to be able to do some what if scenarios, right? So if I do this, or if I pick up this extra shift, what will that mean to my net pay? One student had a phenomenal idea of, hey, I want the ability to, if I pick up that extra shift, I want to be able to say for that extra shift, I want that shift and whatever the net is for that to go to a savings account. Just
Mm.
that one extra shift. Whenever I pick up extra shifts, I want it to go here to my rainy day fund, right? So that, to me, that's where technology can really help and really drive a phenomenal experience for our team members. And then when they do have a question, when they still have a question, have that human on the other side of it. Maybe it still is a chat feature available, but make it easy to have that quickly transition over to the chatbots. I love my chatbots until, you just get in this painful loop of, is this what you're asking for?
Yeah.
Is this what you're asking for? No, when I say no twice, put me through to a human. I'm still fine with
Exactly.
going with them through chat. I'm still fine with that, but get to a human experience somehow.
I like that twice no two no's threshold to get to a human. I like that. And I like that story you were painting for me until I had to start contributing again, spiking again to Social Security in January. It was sounding really good. Um,
But hey,
um,
we all the time we get those calls in
yeah,
January. We see the spike. You guys are taking way more. No, your Social Security ended in September, or worse, it's some people in the C-suite. They hit their limit in January, and then they're upset the following January when we take. What's this? Well, okay, let's educate you again on that. So yeah, I mean, look, I just we can predict these things. We've been predicting them for years without the use of AI and machine learning. Now we can predict even more through the technology.
yeah, we hear a lot about payroll. The automation is coming, right? And there's gonna, be a lot more automation with AI and all this in the not too distant future. We hear about autonomous payroll here. What's the future of payroll? We hear needs to become more strategic. Well, and then, yes, well, what does strategic payroll look like? What does that mean? It sounds exciting. I'm looking forward to it, but what does it actually mean? And one of the things I think it means, I'm getting from this conversation, Troy, is that payroll will be a lot more about employee engagement, and that's going to be the new role for a lot of folks in payroll is
I, I,
interaction.
I, I think that's when an organization does become a game changer, right? When we can really wrap our arms around the employees. And still a lot. I was at at an event about 3 weeks ago here, and I had the opportunity to sit with a chief people officer at a very large company, and I asked him how often does he dig into the payroll data, and he kind of looked at me. He's like, Oh, no, I don't. And so we talked about it. We spent the next 20 minutes talking about the importance of the payroll data. And hey, have you looked by your stores, by your locations, where you have more payroll errors? I bet you're going to find other issues there. I bet you're going to find more call outs, higher turnover rates, lower engagement. And so, after that dinner, he was like, look, I got some homework to do. I need to set up some time here in the next few weeks with my payroll department, right? That's how payroll can become much, much, much more strategic, because every program, you can put every program out there, you can provide phenomenal benefits, and you're paying the team members wrong, or the manager's not following through on all of their steps. You're going to lose the employees very quickly.
Yeah, yeah. The future's looking pretty bright. This is encouraging. Troy, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. This has been really fascinating to go through these findings.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Workforce Management and Payroll Insights by HR.com. We hope today's episode brought you valuable insights and fresh perspectives on the future of payroll and workforce management. Be sure to check out more episodes and explore resources at HR.com/podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep innovating and making a difference in the world of payroll and workforce management.